My name is Kylie, 28 years old, and as a financial analyst, I always believed hard work would eventually earn my family's respect. I expected a modest celebration for my birthday, but never imagined they'd take me to Golden Corral, hand me a card saying, "Maybe next year you'll do something worth celebrating," and laugh collectively at my pain. I just smiled, snapped a picture of their gleeful faces, and walked out. 3 days later, they were frantically messaging, wondering where I disappeared to. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're from and hit that subscribe button. I think you'll want to see how this story ends. Working at Morris Financial Partners has been my life for the past 6 years. I joined right after getting my MBA, starting in an entry-level position, while my classmates landed more prestigious roles. It wasn't the dream job, but I was determined to prove myself through dedication and consistent performance. While my peers job hopped for quick promotions, I stayed slowly building a reputation for reliability and insight. Last month, all that patience finally paid off when I was promoted to senior financial analyst. My family dynamics have always been complicated. My older brother Jacob, 32, is the golden child. With his law degree from Yale and partnership at a prestigious firm, he's the standard against which we're all measured. My younger sister Amanda, 24, is the baby of the family, perpetually coddled despite her somewhat aimless path through 3 different college majors before settling on fashion marketing. Then there's me in the middle, never quite measuring up to Jacob, never quite receiving the indulgence granted to Amanda. Our parents, Michael and Susan, have never tried to hide their favoritism. Dad, a successful surgeon, connects with Jacob over their professional success. Mom, a former beauty pageant contestant, turned real estate agent, dotes on Amanda, who inherited her striking looks and social grace. I take after my grandmother with my practical nature and analytical mind traits that earn respect in my professional life, but little admiration within my family. Previous birthdays set the pattern years ago. When Jacob turned 25, our parents surprised him with a week-long trip to Aspen. For Amanda's 21st, they rented a yacht for a weekend celebration with all her friends. My birthdays typically merit a group text, sometimes a casual dinner if everyone's schedules align. Last year, they completely forgot until Facebook reminded them 2 days later. Despite this history, I allowed myself to hope this year might be different. My promotion came with a significant raise and more responsibility managing client portfolios. For once, I had something tangible to show for my dedication and achievement even they couldn't dismiss. I mentioned it during our weekly family call, trying to sound casual while secretly hoping for acknowledgement. When Mom suggested a birthday dinner, my heart lifted. I recommended Emilio's, an Italian restaurant I'd been wanting to try. Nothing extravagant, just good food and a warm atmosphere. She hesitated, but agreed to make the reservation. The day before, Dad texted that they'd changed the plan. Golden Corral at 7. Jacob knows the manager. No explanation for the change, just an expectation that I'd comply. That evening, I spent extra time getting ready, choosing a navy blue dress that made me feel confident. I curled my hair, applied makeup more carefully than usual, and even wore the pearl earrings Grandma left me. Looking in the mirror, I practiced smiles until I found one that appeared genuine rather than hopeful. Lower your expectations, I told my reflection. Just enjoy having everyone together. The drive to the restaurant was filled with conflicting emotions. Excitement at seeing everyone, anxiety about potential criticism, determination to enjoy my birthday regardless of their behavior. I rehearsed responses to likely scenarios, preparing myself to gracefully handle whatever the evening might bring. Traffic was heavier than expected, making me 10 minutes late. I texted an apology, receiving only a thumbs-up emoji from Amanda in response. As I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed my parents' luxury SUV and Jacob's Tesla already there. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my purse and the remnants of my optimism and walked toward the entrance, unaware that this birthday would become a turning point in ways I never could have anticipated. The Golden Corral's entrance was plastered with faded promotional posters and smudged glass doors. Inside, fluorescent lighting cast a harsh glow over everything, making the worn carpet and dated decor look even more depressing. The air was heavy with the smell of fryer oil and cheap cleaning products. This was about as far from Emilio's elegant ambiance as you could get. I spotted my family at a corner booth. Jacob was checking his phone while Amanda took selfies with different filters. My parents sat side by side, engrossed in conversation with each other. None of them looked up until I was standing right at the table. "Finally," Jacob said, glancing at his watch. "We were about to start without you." "Sorry about the traffic," I replied, sliding into the seat next to Amanda, who barely acknowledged me before returning to her phone. "Well, happy birthday," Mom said, her tone more obligatory than celebratory. "Should we get food first, and then do the card and presents?" "Sounds good." I agreed, trying to maintain a positive attitude. The buffet itself was exactly what you'd expect on a Tuesday night after the dinner rush. Warming trays held congealing food, some items clearly having sat out too long. I selected a small portion of the least questionable options and returned to the table where Jacob was already regaling everyone with his latest courtroom victory. The opposing counsel thought he had us cornered with that precedent from the Jefferson case, but I found a procedural error in the original filing that completely invalidated their argument, he explained, gesturing with his fork for emphasis. "That's my boy," Dad beamed, looking genuinely proud. "Always finding the angle others miss." "The senior partners were so impressed they're putting me on the Westlake merger," Jacob continued. "It's the biggest deal the firm has handled this year. Could mean early partnership track if I nail it." Mom reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "We never doubted you would rise to the top, honey." The conversation shifted to Amanda next, who had just returned from a 2-week educational trip to Europe, mostly funded by our parents. "Paris was absolutely life-changing," she gushed, scrolling through photos on her phone. "The fashion houses, the culture, the people. I made so many industry connections for when I graduate." "Show them the picture with that designer," Mom urged, practically glowing with vicarious excitement. Amanda pulled up a selfie with someone I vaguely recognized from fashion magazines. "Jean-Pierre actually suggested I apply for their summer internship program. He said my aesthetic sensibility is exactly what they're looking for." "That would be an amazing opportunity," Dad said. "We should talk about apartment options in Paris if you get it." I sat quietly picking at my mediocre food, waiting for someone to ask about my life. The promotion, the new project, I was leading, anything. After 20 minutes of Jacob and Amanda dominating the conversation, I attempted to join in during a brief lull. "I've been assigned to manage the Reynolds account at work," I offered. "It's our third largest client portfolio and—" "Before I forget," Jacob interrupted, "did Mom tell you I'm closing on a new condo next month? Riverview doorman, building the works." Just like that, my news evaporated from the conversation. I tried once more when Amanda paused her Europe stories to get more food. "The promotion has been really challenging, but rewarding," I said, addressing my parents directly. "My team has already increased portfolio performance by 4% this quarter." Dad nodded distractedly while checking a text message. Mom glanced up briefly from Amanda's photos still displayed on the table. "That's nice, dear," she said without follow-up questions. When Amanda returned, the conversation immediately shifted back to her potential Paris internship. After we finished eating, Mom reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "Time for your card," she announced, sliding it across the table. The envelope was plain white, not even a birthday design. I opened it, trying to maintain my smile as I pulled out a generic card with a stock image of a cake. Inside was a $20 bill and a handwritten message. "Maybe next year you'll do something worth celebrating." I looked up confused, thinking it must be some sort of mistake. But Jacob was smirking, Amanda was covering a giggle with her hand, and even my parents wore amused expressions. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked quietly. "Come on, Kylie, lighten up," Jacob said. "It's just a little family humor." "We're just saying maybe next year you'll have more exciting news than a little promotion," Amanda added, as if explaining something obvious. "It's not a little promotion," I countered, my voice still steady, despite the knot forming in my throat. "I worked 6 years for this." 6 years for a mid-level position," Dad commented. "Jacob made partner track in 4. We're just trying to motivate you." Mom said, her tone suggesting she was being helpful. "You've always been so comfortable with mediocrity." They all chuckled, including Mom, whose approval I'd always secretly hoped for, despite years of evidence that it would never come. In that moment, watching my mother laugh at my humiliation, something inside me shifted. I carefully returned the card to its envelope, my face composed into a neutral expression that revealed nothing of the earthquake happening beneath the surface. The laughter around the table gradually subsided as they moved on to discussing Jacob's upcoming court case. I sat perfectly still, a storm of emotions raging behind my calm facade. The $20 bill from the card lay on the table, an insulting token that quantified exactly how little my achievements meant to them. "You should come to the firm's holiday party next month," Jacob said, turning to our parents. "The managing partners always ask about you, Dad. Amanda, you could network with some of the clients. Lots of business executives with fashion industry connections." No invitation extended to me naturally. I was invisible again, as I had been throughout my childhood when Jacob brought home trophies, and Amanda charmed everyone at family gatherings. "Speaking of celebrations," my father interjected, "Jacob, tell Kylie about your bonus." My brother straightened up, adjusting his expensive tie. "The firm gave me a $60,000 bonus for bringing in the Henderson client. I'm using part of it for a 2-week vacation in the Maldives next month." "Overwater bungalow," Amanda added enviously. "He showed me the pictures." My mother touched my arm, finally acknowledging me, but only to say, "Maybe you should consider law school, Kylie. It's not too late to switch to a more prestigious career path." "I'm happy with my career." I responded, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. "Happy with mediocrity," Jacob muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your sister has always been risk-averse," my father explained, as if I wasn't sitting right there. "Some people just aren't built for high achievement." The comment stung with its familiar dismissiveness. This wasn't new, just a continuation of a lifetime pattern. Memories flooded back unbidden, my straight A's being overlooked while Jacob's single A- warranted a celebration dinner. The time I qualified for a national mathematics competition only to have my parents skip it for Amanda's dance recital. Countless family photos where I was positioned at the edge, an afterthought to the perfect family portrait. "Did you see the bag Mom and Dad got me for my half-birthday?" Amanda asked, pulling out an expensive designer purse. "Limited edition. Only 50 made worldwide." Half-birthdays were a tradition only for Amanda. Mine passed without mention, as did Jacob's, though he received spontaneous gifts throughout the year for his accomplishments. "It matches the wallet we got you for Christmas," Mom said proudly. I thought of my Christmas gift from them last year, a $50 gift card to a department store, while Amanda received a weekend spa retreat and Jacob a high-end golf club set. "So Kylie," Jacob continued, "any men in your life yet, or are you still married to those spreadsheets?" "I'm focusing on my career right now," I answered, the practiced response rolling off my tongue. 30 is approaching fast," Mom warned. "The good ones get taken early. You can't be picky when you're—" She paused, giving me a critical once-over. "Well, you know what I mean." I did know. Not beautiful like Amanda. Not naturally charismatic like Jacob. Just regular Kylie with her regular life and regular accomplishments that never quite measured up. "I heard Lisa from your high school just had her 3rd child," Dad commented. "Married a doctor from Johns Hopkins. She was in your graduating class, right?" Another familiar pattern, comparing me unfavorably to peers who had chosen more traditional paths or more impressive careers. "Speaking of your work," Jacob said, swirling the ice in his drink, "I was talking to my friend who manages at Goldman Sachs. Said they'd never hire from your firm. Called it the minor leagues of finance." "Morris Financial is a respected mid-size firm," I defended, hearing the weakness in my voice. "Respected by whom?" Jacob laughed. "No one that matters in the industry." My promotion, which had felt like such an achievement just days ago, withered under their collective dismissal. 6 years of 60-hour weeks, sacrificed weekends, and continuous learning reduced to a joke not even worth acknowledging. "Remember when Kylie thought she was going to medical school?" Amanda giggled. Dad was so relieved when she didn't get in anywhere good. I never said that, Dad protested weakly, not meeting my eyes. You literally said, thank God she won't be operating on anyone, can you imagine? Amanda insisted. The truth hung in the air between us. I had wanted to follow Dad into medicine, but when my MCAT scores came back merely good instead of exceptional, the idea was swiftly discouraged. Jacob's law school applications, meanwhile, received Dad's personal guidance and multiple recommendation letters from his colleagues. Throughout this barrage, I maintained my composure, smiling tightly at appropriate intervals, offering minimal responses, protecting what little dignity I had left. Inside, something was hardening, a protective shell forming around my wounded heart. I had spent 28 years seeking approval from people constitutionally incapable of giving it to me. The realization wasn't new, but the clarity of it was crystallizing with every passing minute at that cheap buffet table under flickering fluorescent lights. At least your apartment is in a safe neighborhood, Mom offered as if granting me a consolation prize for my lackluster existence. Though you really should consider buying instead of renting at your age. On and on it went, death by 1,000 cuts, each comment designed to reinforce my place in the family hierarchy. Not special, not successful, not worth celebrating. Let's take a family photo, Jacob announced, suddenly pulling out his phone. Kylie, hold up your birthday card so we can remember this milestone. The way he emphasized milestone dripped with sarcasm. Amanda snickered while adjusting her hair, and my parents moved closer together wearing their picture-perfect smiles. I sat frozen, the insulting card clutched in my hand, a prop in their ongoing joke at my expense. It was the final straw, that moment of casual cruelty disguised as family togetherness. But instead of handing Jacob my card as instructed, I pulled out my own phone. Actually, I'd like to document this myself, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I snapped a photo of the card with its cruel message visible. Then another of my family's amused faces. Finally, a wider shot capturing the tired buffet restaurant they'd deemed appropriate for my birthday celebration. Each image a piece of evidence, documentation of a pattern I'd endured for too long. My family watched with mild confusion as I carefully gathered my purse and stood up from the table. Kylie, what are you doing? Mom asked, her smile faltering slightly. I looked at each of them in turn. Jacob with his smug superiority, Amanda with her casual dismissiveness, Dad with his perpetual disappointment, and finally Mom, who could have been my ally but consistently chose not to be. Thank you for showing me exactly where I stand in this family, I said quietly. Oh, come on, don't be so sensitive, Jacob scoffed. It was just a joke. Jokes are supposed to be funny, I replied. This was just cruel. We drove all the way here for your birthday, Dad said, sounding annoyed. The least you could do is appreciate the effort. The absurdity of his statement almost made me laugh. Instead, I simply nodded. You're right. I should appreciate what's in front of me. And now I do. With that, I turned and walked toward the exit, my heart pounding but my steps steady. Behind me, I could hear confused murmurs, but no one called out or tried to stop me. I made it to my car before the first tear fell, a silent witness to the magnitude of what had just happened. The drive home passed in a blur. My apartment, usually a place of comfort, felt cavernous and empty that night. I moved mechanically through my evening routine, changing clothes and removing makeup while avoiding my reflection in the mirror. When I finally sat on my bed, the emotions I'd been suppressing erupted in heaving sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and primal within me. Hours later, exhausted but oddly clear-headed, I opened my laptop and began to write. Not to my family, but to myself. The letter poured out of me, unfiltered and raw. Dear Kylie, tonight was a revelation, painful but necessary. For 28 years, you've been seeking validation from people who are fundamentally incapable of giving it. You've measured your worth through their distorted lens, believing something was wrong with you when the problem was their perspective all along. Your promotion is an achievement. Your financial independence is admirable. Your kindness and integrity are valuable qualities, even if they're not celebrated by people who prioritize status and appearance. From this moment forward, you are released from the obligation to seek their approval. You are free to define success on your own terms. You are permitted to surround yourself with people who recognize your worth without requiring you to constantly prove it. It's time to stop hoping they'll change. It's time to change how you respond to them instead. I continued writing until dawn broke, excavating years of buried hurt and examining it in the light of my new resolution. When I finally finished, I saved the document, closed my laptop, and made two immediate decisions. First, I deleted all social media apps from my phone, severing the constant digital connection to my family. Second, I silenced notifications from our family group chat and individual messages. I wasn't ready to cut contact entirely, but I needed space to process what had happened and what should come next. As the sun rose on the day after my birthday, I felt something unexpected, not just grief for the family relationship I'd never had, but a sense of possibility about the life I could create once I stopped arranging everything around their approval. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure, like standing at the edge of a cliff and finally choosing to spread my wings instead of retreating to safer ground. I showered, dressed for work, and applied makeup to hide the evidence of my sleepless night. In my kitchen, I made coffee and toast, going through the motions of normalcy, while knowing that nothing would ever be quite the same again. Something fundamental had shifted inside me, a recognition of my own value that had been missing for as long as I could remember. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered to my empty apartment. "This year, I'm giving myself the gift of self-respect." The office hummed with Monday morning activity as I navigated to my cubicle. My promotion had come with a small office, but it wouldn't be ready until next week. For now, I remained in the familiar space I'd occupied for years, though people regarded me differently since the announcement. Nods of respect from senior staff, congratulatory emails from colleagues, a small plant from my team with a card signed by everyone. More acknowledgement for my achievement than my own family had offered. I threw myself into work with unusual intensity, reviewing client portfolios and finalizing the presentation for the Reynolds account. The familiar rhythm of numbers and projections was comforting, a world where merit was measurable and effort generally rewarded. Around noon, Sarah from marketing appeared at my desk. We'd become friendly over the years, occasionally grabbing lunch or after-work drinks. "Earth to Kylie," she said, waving a hand in front of my face. "I've been standing here for like 30 seconds. I blinked, pulling myself away from the spreadsheet. "Sorry, just focused." Sarah studied my face, her expression shifting to concern. "Are you okay? You look like you haven't slept." "I'm fine," I replied automatically. "Yeah, and I'm Beyoncé," she countered. "Come on mandatory lunch break. That report will still be there when you get back." Something about her genuine concern cracked my carefully constructed professional facade. I nodded wordlessly, grabbing my purse and following her to the elevator. At a small cafe 2 blocks from the office over sandwiches, neither of us was really eating, the story spilled out. The buffet, the card, the years of subtle and not so subtle put-downs. Sarah listened without interruption, her expression cycling through shock, anger, and empathy. "That's not normal, Kylie," she said finally. "That's not how families are supposed to treat each other." "I know that intellectually," I admitted, "but emotionally it's all I've ever known." "So what happens now?" she asked. "After you walked out, did they try to contact you?" "A few texts last night asking where I went. I didn't respond." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I know a group that might help. It's for adults dealing with family dysfunction. I went after my divorce when I had to keep seeing my ex at family gatherings because of our kids. It helped me set boundaries." She wrote down the information for the weekly meeting. For the first time since my birthday disaster, I felt a glimmer of hope. Someone had witnessed my pain and validated it instead of dismissing it. Someone thought I deserved better. Back at work, I completed the Reynolds presentation with renewed focus, channeling my emotional energy into creating something exceptional. Before leaving for the day, I called my bank and made an impulsive but deliberate decision. I transferred money from my savings account money I'd been putting aside for a hypothetical house down payment and booked a 2-week trip to Italy. Not Paris, where Amanda had just been, not the Maldives where Jacob was going, but Florence and the Tuscan countryside places I'd always dreamed of visiting. Art, history, wine, country, cooking classes. My dream, not a competition. The trip would start this weekend, giving me just enough time to prepare and notify work. The second day after my birthday was spent organizing the logistics of my sudden departure. I requested emergency personal leave citing family issues, which was technically true. My boss, still grateful for my handling of a difficult client situation last quarter, approved it without probing questions. I arranged for my neighbor to water my plants and collect my mail. Each practical step felt like reclaiming a piece of my life, asserting control over my own narrative. That evening, I posted a single image to my otherwise dormant social media, just the plane ticket with the caption, "Sometimes you need to gift yourself what others won't." Self-love, Tuscany, #solo travel. It wasn't aimed at my family, but I knew they would see it. Part of me wanted them to recognize that their opinion of me no longer determined my actions. I turned off comments and notifications immediately after posting, not interested in their reactions or anyone else's. On the morning of the third day after my birthday, I awakened to the sound of my phone vibrating persistently on my nightstand. Bleary-eyed, I checked the screen to find a flood of notifications from our family group chat. The first message was from Amanda. "Has anyone heard from Kylie? She's not responding to my texts." Jacob had replied, probably sulking about her birthday. Classic Kylie overreaction. Then more messages rolled in as the morning progressed, the tone shifting from irritation to confusion, to the beginning edges of concern. Amanda mentioned my social media post about Italy. My parents weighed in, initially dismissive, then increasingly worried, as no one could confirm my whereabouts. By noon, the messages had taken on a frantic quality. Jacob reported calling my office only to learn I'd taken personal leave. My mother texted about driving by my apartment but getting no answer at the door. Even my father, typically emotionally reserved, sent a direct message asking if I was safe. I watched this digital panic unfold without responding, a strange sense of detachment allowing me to observe their concern without immediately reacting to it. For once I was the center of their attention, but not on their terms. Not as the family disappointment or the reliable middle child who never caused trouble. Instead, I was an independent adult who had removed herself from a toxic situation and was prioritizing her own well-being. The realization was startlingly empowering. The family group chat continued to explode throughout the day. My phone buzzed so frequently that I finally silenced it completely, placing it face down on my kitchen counter while I packed for Italy. Each carefully folded item represented a choice made for myself alone: comfortable walking shoes for exploring Florentine streets, a journal to record my thoughts, the novel I'd been wanting to read for months. Amanda's messages became increasingly dramatic. "I'm seriously worried about Kylie. This isn't like her. What if something happened?" Jacob's initial dismissiveness gradually gave way to genuine concern. "I called some hospitals just to be safe. Nothing. Her car is at her apartment complex, but no answer at her door." My mother escalated to voice messages, her tone veering between anger and worry. "Kylie Elizabeth, this behavior is completely unacceptable. Call me immediately." Then later, "Sweetie, we're all very concerned. Please just let us know you're all right." My father, typically the most emotionally reserved, sent a single direct message: "Your mother is beside herself with worry. Whatever issue you have with us, please don't punish her this way." The irony of his concern for my mother's feelings rather than mine wasn't lost on me. By late afternoon, Jacob took more drastic measures. My neighbor texted that my brother and sister were at my apartment building, Jacob talking with the property manager, while Amanda peered anxiously through my windows. The property manager, respecting tenant privacy, refused to let them in without evidence of a genuine emergency. Sarah called around 5, checking how I was doing. When I told her about my family's escalating panic, she laughed appreciatively. "Good for you," she said. "Let them stew in it for a bit. When do you leave for Italy?" "Saturday morning," I replied. "Early flight to Rome, then, connecting to Florence." "Are you going to tell them you're okay before you go?" I considered the question. "Yes, but not yet, and not with any details." After we hung up, I continued packing, periodically glancing at my silent phone, accumulating notifications. The group chat had evolved from concern to action planning. Jacob mentioned contacting my boss, who confirmed only that I had taken personal leave for private reasons. Amanda suggested calling hospitals again. My mother proposed filing a missing persons report, though my father pointed out I was an adult who had only been out of contact for 3 days, hardly qualifying as missing. What struck me most about their messages was the complete absence of self-reflection. No one questioned whether their behavior at my birthday dinner might have triggered my departure. No one acknowledged the cruel card or the years of subtle undermining that preceded it. In their narrative, I was having an inexplicable emotional reaction, not responding to long-standing mistreatment. Around 7 that evening, Jacob upped the ante with a particularly invasive move. A message from my boss appeared in my work email. "Kylie, your brother contacted me directly on my personal cell phone, said he got the number from a mutual acquaintance. He's quite concerned about you and asked if you've been in touch about your leave. I respected your privacy and shared no details, but wanted you to be aware. Hope everything is okay." That crossed a line. Jacob had potentially jeopardized my professional reputation by dragging my workplace into family drama. I decided it was time for a brief, controlled response. To the group chat, I sent a single message. "I am safe. I need some time to myself. Please respect that." Then I muted the conversation again without waiting for replies. To my boss, I sent a professional email thanking him for respecting my privacy and assuring him I would return from leave as scheduled, fully prepared to resume my responsibilities. That evening, I attended the support group Sarah had recommended. In a church basement with coffee and folding chairs, I listened to strangers share stories of family dynamics with unsettling parallels to my own. A woman described her mother's constant criticism. A man detailed his siblings' competitive undermining. An older gentleman explained how he'd limited contact with toxic relatives to preserve his mental health. When my turn came, I shared briefly about my birthday dinner and decision to step back from my family. Heads nodded in recognition. No one suggested I was overreacting. No one advised immediate forgiveness or reconciliation. Instead, they offered understanding and practical suggestions for establishing healthier boundaries. "You're not responsible for managing their feelings about your decisions," the group facilitator told me. "That's the first and hardest lesson." I left feeling less alone, armed with book recommendations and websites about family dynamics and emotional healing. Back home, I checked my phone once more before bed. The group chat had exploded with responses to my brief message, ranging from relief to anger at my cryptic communication. My mother had sent several private messages, alternating between guilt trips and expressions of worry. One message from an unexpected source gave me pause. My father, not typically one for direct communication, had written simply, "I sense there's more to this than a birthday dinner. When you're ready to talk, I'm willing to listen." It wasn't an apology or even an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but it was the closest thing to genuine reflection any of them had offered. I didn't respond, but filed it away as a possible opening for eventual conversation. As I prepared for bed, packing nearly complete for my first solo international trip, I felt a complex mix of emotions: lingering hurt from the birthday dinner, anxiety about traveling alone, but predominantly a growing sense of liberation. For 28 years, I had orbited around my family's sun, defining myself by their light and shadow. Now I was charting my own course through the universe, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. On my nightstand sat the airline ticket that represented more than just a vacation. It was a declaration of independence, a statement that I deserved to celebrate myself even if no one else would. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized that my family's cruel birthday card had inadvertently given me the most valuable gift of all the push I needed to finally break free. The drive to the airport early Saturday morning had a dreamlike quality. Dawn was just breaking as I navigated the nearly empty streets, my suitcase and carry-on packed with care in the trunk. I'd spent Friday finalizing details, arranging airport parking, confirming hotel reservations, downloading travel apps with offline maps of Florence and Tuscany. Before leaving my apartment, I'd sent a brief update to the family chat. I'm taking a trip I've always wanted to take. I'll be out of regular contact for 2 weeks. I am safe and well. Then I switched my phone to airplane mode, determined to begin my journey without their voices in my head. At the terminal, surrounded by excited travelers and emotional goodbyes, I felt strangely calm. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I was acting purely for my own happiness, without calculating how my choices would be judged by my family. The freedom was intoxicating. The transatlantic flight offered hours of uninterrupted reflection. Between movies and fitful sleep, I journaled about what I hoped to gain from this physical and emotional distance. Not revenge or punishment for my family, but clarity for myself. Space to hear my own thoughts without their constant commentary. Permission to enjoy achievements and pleasures without their measuring stick of worth. Landing in Rome, making my connection to Florence, navigating foreign transit systems, all these tasks required complete presence, leaving no mental energy for ruminating on past hurts. By the time I checked into my charming hotel near the Ponte Vecchio, exhaustion and excitement had created a peculiar euphoria. I showered away the travel grime, changed into fresh clothes, and ventured out into the early evening, determined to begin my adventure immediately. Florence greeted me with golden hour light on ancient buildings, the musical cadence of Italian conversations around me, and the rich aroma of espresso from sidewalk cafes. I found a small restaurant with outdoor seating, ordered pasta and wine in halting Italian, and watched the world flow past. No one here knew me as Jacob's less successful sister, or Amanda's plainer sibling. I was just another traveler, assessed on my present self rather than family history. That night I briefly turned on my phone to find dozens of messages ranging from concern to anger. Jacob demanded to know where exactly I was traveling and why I hadn't consulted the family before making such an impulsive decision. Amanda vacillated between worry and envy, asking for photos while simultaneously questioning my judgment. My mother's messages grew increasingly desperate, culminating in, "I don't understand why you're punishing us this way." Only my father maintained relative restraint. "Be safe. Check in when you can." I sent a single sunset photo with, "Florence is beautiful. I'm well," before returning to airplane mode. The next morning brought my first full day of freedom. I joined a walking tour of Renaissance landmarks, losing myself in stories of the Medicis and Michelangelo. In the Uffizi Gallery, I stood transfixed before Botticelli's Birth of Venus, moved to unexpected tears by its beauty. Later, climbing the Duomo's hundreds of steps rewarded me with a panoramic view of terracotta rooftops and distant Tuscan hills. Each day that followed unfolded with similar magic. I took a cooking class, learning to make pasta from scratch, with an enthusiastic grandmother who spoke little English, but communicated through universal smiles and encouraging pats. I joined a wine tour through Chianti, bonding with other solo travelers over Sangiovese and sunset views of vineyards. I sat in piazzas with my journal, capturing impressions and allowing random thoughts to surface without judgment. Midway through the trip, I checked my phone again, finding the tone of family messages subtly shifted. There were still demands for explanation, but also signs that my absence had created space for reflection. Amanda admitted, "Maybe we were a bit harsh at your birthday." Jacob mentioned, "I might have been insensitive about your promotion." My mother wrote, "I keep thinking about things I could have done differently." These weren't full apologies or acknowledgments of the broader pattern, but they were hairline cracks in the family narrative that had always cast me as too sensitive, rather than them as too dismissive. I responded with another photo and brief update, maintaining friendly distance without being drawn into detailed discussion. As my second week in Italy progressed, I noticed internal changes keeping pace with my external adventures. I spoke up more confidently in group settings. I made decisions without second-guessing myself. I took pleasure in small accomplishments without qualifying them. The constant internal voice measuring everything against my family's potential judgment grew quieter, sometimes disappearing completely for hours at a stretch. One evening in a small Tuscan town, I shared dinner with an older American couple celebrating their 40th anniversary. When they asked what brought me to Italy alone, I surprised myself by sharing a condensed version of my story. "Good for you," the woman said firmly. "I spent 20 years trying to please my mother before I realized it was impossible. Some people aren't capable of giving what we need from them. The hardest part," her husband added, "is accepting them as they are without letting their limitations limit you." Their words stayed with me throughout my final days in Italy. I wasn't responsible for changing my family, only for changing how their treatment affected me. I couldn't make them value what I offered, but I could value it myself and find others who did too. The night before my return flight, I crafted a longer message to my family explaining that I would be home the next day and was open to talking in person after I'd had time to rest. "This trip gave me perspective I needed," I wrote. "I hope we can have an honest conversation about our family dynamics moving forward." Responses came quickly: relief questions, a few defensive comments, but also tentative openness. My father surprisingly suggested Sunday dinner at their house to clear the air. I agreed, setting a week's buffer to readjust to home and work routines first. Flying home, watching Italy recede beneath clouds, I felt neither dread nor eager anticipation about facing my family. Instead, I felt grounded in newfound self-respect that would guide me regardless of their reaction. The frightened people-pleaser who had walked out of that buffet restaurant 3 weeks earlier was gone, transformed not by the magic of travel, but by the harder magic of finally acknowledging my own worth. 2 weeks after returning from Italy, I stood on my parents' doorstep, a bottle of Tuscan wine in hand, and newfound resolve in my heart. The support group had helped me prepare for this meeting role, playing difficult conversations and establishing clear boundaries in advance. I would remain calm but honest, express my feelings without attacking, and be prepared to leave if respect wasn't maintained. Mom answered the door with an awkward hug that I returned briefly before stepping inside. The house smelled of her signature pot roast, a peace offering disguised as Sunday dinner. In the living room, Jacob and Amanda sat unnaturally stiff on the sofa, their usual easy confidence replaced by visible discomfort. "You look different," Amanda blurted as I took a seat. "Italy agrees with you," Dad added from his armchair, studying me with uncharacteristic attentiveness. They were right. Beyond my slight tan and the highlights the Tuscan sun had brought out in my hair, there was a fundamental shift in how I carried myself. I sat straighter, made direct eye contact, occupied space unapologetically. After painful small talk over appetizers, Mom finally addressed the elephant in the room as we moved to the dining table. "Kylie, we've been worried sick. That birthday dinner, then you just disappeared to another country without telling anyone. It wasn't like you at all." "That's exactly why I needed to do it," I replied evenly. "The person you think I am, the one who accepts disrespect without protest, isn't who I want to be anymore." Disrespect. Jacob frowned. "It was just a joke card." "It wasn't just the card," I said, placing my fork down carefully. "It was years of subtle and not so subtle messages that my achievements don't matter, my feelings don't matter, and I don't quite measure up to the family standard." "That's not fair," Amanda protested. "We tease each other all the time." "You tease me. I don't recall either of you being the consistent target of jokes about your worth." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Dad cleared his throat. "We may have been insensitive sometimes." He offered the closest thing to an admission I'd ever heard from him. "The card was mean," Mom said, suddenly surprising everyone. "I knew it when I saw it in the store, but Jacob said it was funny and I went along with it." She looked down at her plate. "I should have stood up for you." Her unexpected acknowledgement loosened something in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but a pathway toward it. I've spent a lot of time thinking about our family, I continued. I love you all, but I don't love how we interact. I don't love feeling like the family disappointment because my choices don't mirror yours. You're not a disappointment, Mom insisted, though her tone lacked conviction. Actions speak louder than words, I countered gently. The cheap buffet for my birthday when Jacob gets 5-star restaurants. The dismissive comments about my career when Amanda gets support for every changing interest. The constant comparisons where I always come up short. Jacob looked genuinely perplexed. But you've always been so stable. You never seem to need the extra attention. Everyone needs recognition, Jacob. Everyone needs to feel valued. The conversation continued through dinner, sometimes heated, occasionally defensive, but remarkably honest. For the first time, I didn't back down or swallow my feelings to keep peace. I named specific incidents, explained their impact, and held firm when they tried to minimize my experience. By dessert, something had shifted. No dramatic apologies or tearful reconciliations, but a tentative new awareness. Dad admitted he'd never really understood my career, because it was so different from his own. Mom acknowledged that she'd favored Amanda because they were more similar. Jacob most surprisingly confessed that his competitive attitude stemmed partly from insecurity. You've always been smarter than me, he said grudgingly. I just had better social skills and got luckier breaks. I didn't fully accept all their explanations or partial apologies, but recognized them as starting points. As I prepared to leave, I established clear boundaries for moving forward. I want us to have a better relationship, I told them, but that requires mutual respect. I won't participate in conversations that demean my choices or achievements. I won't accept jokes at my expense, and I need time and space to process years of hurt. They agreed with varying degrees of understanding. Mom hugged me tightly at the door, whispering, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. I should have done that with my own family. The healing process unfolded gradually over the following months. Some family interactions remained awkward old patterns, reasserting themselves before being consciously corrected. My father struggled most with change, occasionally lapsing into dismissive comments before catching himself. Amanda fluctuated between genuine effort and unconscious competitiveness. Jacob surprisingly made the most consistent progress, checking himself when conversation turned to status comparisons. My mother became an unexpected ally, calling regularly, just to talk about my day without comparison or judgment. During one such conversation, she confessed, I always envied your independence. I married right out of college and never developed my own identity separate from being a wife and mother. Parallel to these family changes, I continued building a more authentic life. The support group became a regular part of my routine. Sarah and I grew closer, often meeting for weekend hikes or movie nights. I joined a book club and photography class, developing friendships with people who knew nothing about my family dynamics and appreciated me for exactly who I was. At work, my confidence translated to greater effectiveness. I spoke up more in meetings, proposed innovative strategies for client portfolios, and mentored junior analysts. My boss noticed the change, commenting that my quiet competence had gained a voice. When my next birthday approached, I took control of the narrative, organizing my own celebration. I rented a private room at Emilio's, the Italian restaurant I'd originally suggested, and invited friends from various parts of my life, work colleagues, support group members, neighbors, photography classmates. I also invited my family with the explicit understanding that this was my celebration on my terms. The evening was everything my previous birthday wasn't: warm, affirming, filled with genuine connection. My family arrived bearing thoughtful gifts that reflected actual knowledge of my interests. A photography book from Dad, a hand-knit scarf from Mom, a gift certificate for Italian cooking classes from Amanda and from Jacob, surprisingly, a framed copy of my first published financial analysis article that I hadn't even realized he'd noticed. As cake was served, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, rather than who they thought I should be, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The cruel birthday card that had broken my heart had also broken open a door to authentic living. Walking out of that buffet restaurant had been my first step toward walking into a life of self-respect and genuine connection. The path hadn't been straight or simple. Some family wounds were still healing, some boundaries still being tested and reinforced. But sitting there accepting good wishes and genuine affection, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for most of my life. I had finally learned that validation from others means nothing without validation from yourself, and that sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to walk away from what diminishes us. Sometimes we need to lose what we thought we wanted to find what we truly deserve. If my story resonates with you, I'd love to hear about a time when you had to set boundaries with people close to you. Was it difficult? Worth it? Leave a comment below and let me know. And if this story helped you feel less alone, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories, and share with someone who might need to hear this message. Thank you for being part of my journey of healing and self-discovery.